Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I don't even know if anyone's here yet. Let's double check some things and see if everything is set up properly. Hey, there's some people here. Let me go share it in a couple places so that way people can know that it's here, since most people aren't subscribed to the UK channel. Okay. Okay, so we've got some people here. I think I'm just going to get started. So first off, can you guys hear me? That is the first thing I need to probably address. So if you guys can hear me in the chat, will you just comment that you can hear me? I'm using a different microphone than I normally do, so I want to make sure it's working. I see one yes, two yes. Okay, I think we're good then. So we'll get started then. So first off, thanks you guys for joining in. What we're going to do with this, because it's kind of an odd thing, I'm sure many of you are wondering, like, why on earth we're here on my UK channel rather than on the normal channel. And the reason why I'm going to just do a little live stream here is, one, it's been 2 years since I started out with this Q&A, and so I want to just hurry and get out as much as I can to you guys. I know it's been too long. I've waited too long on this, and so I'm going to live stream the initial recording, and it's going to be very rough, like how it is right now, where I'm just talking, and there's going to be random bits and pieces that aren't going to be super professional. But what I'm going to do is later I'm going to download the live stream, and I'm actually going to splice it up and make it into a more professional, clean cut version, and that will be uploaded on my original channel. And so we'll do that eventually. But for now, this is it. I'm only going to be live streaming for about an hour or so. I'm going to cut myself off. I'm in the middle of finals week right now. This is kind of just my little break from all the schoolwork that I've got, and I'm going to just do an hour of Thomas and then get back to the grind of school and whatnot. And would like to do is I'd like to try and cover these different all the Q&A questions. There's about, I think, 500 questions were asked, or if not more than that. There's a lot of questions. Anyways, I'm going to try and cover as many of those as possible. Hopefully over the next few days, I'd like to try and maybe do like 1 hour, one day, each day, I should say, over the next couple of weeks. Or, well, not over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of days, over the next week. Then there's Christmas break and whatnot. If there's more that I have to take care of, probably at the start of the year. But I'd like to try and get these done as soon as possible, because I know you guys have asked these questions and I haven't answered them yet. And so I'd like to be able to answer them for you guys, to be able to enjoy and be able to take part and all the fun with this. So, okay, well, let's get started with this. So first of all, thanks again for coming back and watching this Q&A, and let's get started. So first of all, 2 years ago, I made the announcement that I was going to do a Q&A. I was at 9,000 subscribers, and I decided that when I reached 10,000, I would cut off the submissions for questions, and then I would take the questions and create a Q&A video. When I started doing that, it was at a kind of a particular time in life where basically what happened is I got super busy in school. I was in prerequisites for the business school that I wanted to get into, and so it was a really intense time in my schooling, and so I just wasn't really able to finish up the Q&A. I had stuff going on with the Tom's Creator Collective. I was trying to prep my own stuff to be able to film in the future, and so the Q&A just kind of became less of a priority, and trying to make sure I had videos for the future in general for years to come was more important, and just making sure that my channel was going to survive. So then what happened is that whole so the spring after I had made the announcement video and whatnot, I had done some work on it. I made the spreadsheet, put everything together for the Q&A, and then I just got super busy. Then summer came along, and I actually spent that whole summer filming for my own series, and that's where most of the footage from all the remakes that you're seeing on my channel right now. That's when I filmed that. I filmed about 2/3 of my own third and fourth seasons, because I tried to actually combine them to get as much done as possible on those sets when I built them. And so I filmed about 2/3 of it, but sadly that last third still needs to be filmed, and I don't know when I'll get around to that, because I can't film right now. I can't rent a space. I'm not in the position in life right now to be able to do that. So that's why my channel is mainly clips right now, and that's why those things kind of took priority over the Q&A video. And so I worked on the Q&A over time, just doing little bits here and there. And so finally, now that I've completed everything you guys saw a couple weeks ago, I uploaded the complete remake of The Adventure Begins. That was kind of the big project that was taking up most of my time. And so that was also one of the reasons why I put off this Q&A. Now that that's done, the Q&A has become kind of my big priority right now that I want to just check off and get done. And so that's why we're here now, 2 years later. I guess better late than never. But yeah, so let's look at the sections we're going to be covering in this Q&A. So there were roughly 500 questions that were asked, and I believe there was like almost 300 duplicates. Not entirely sure what the exact number was. There's about 250 questions, original unique questions, and they're divided up into these sections that are listed here on this screen. So we've got the television series, which is what we're going to be covering first and talking about today. Then we've got the random miscellaneous questions. A lot of them, they just didn't fit into the other sections. They're not, those were a lot of ones that aren't Thomas related. They're just about me in general, or things about my life, or things I like that are outside of Thomas. Then we've got my series, particularly my YouTube series that I have. And then we're going to go into Big World, Big Adventures, which will be an interesting one. Yeah, that that one's going to be a fun one. And then we've got behind the scenes, particularly my filming and how I do certain things. And then the Thomas community, which includes the Thomas community channel that I worked with Diesel D199, Enterprising Engine 93, and Percy Engine 619. And then we've got the Railway series. There were some questions that were asked about the books, YouTube questions in general about certain practices, things about YouTube in general. Then we've got the Thomas Creator Collective that I'll also talk about. And that one is going to be interesting because I haven't been a part of the Creator Collective for about 1.5 years now. Legally, I have no obligation to keep secret on certain things. So it's going to kind of be a tell all type thing situation. Well, I'll talk about kind of like my perspective of being in the Creator Collective, what the process was for me. I'm obviously not going to just sit there and bash the Creator Collective the whole time, because I still have great respect for the people who work on it, and it was a great opportunity for me. So I'm not gonna just sit there and hate on it, but I'm gonna be open and honest, because I'm not a part of it anymore, and I don't need to be silent about certain things. So that'll be a fun, entertaining one. I think you guys will enjoy. In the last section, we'll talk about toys. I know particularly lately, everyone's been pretty upset with the direction of all the toy lines. So we're going to kind of discuss certain things that I like and dislike. And yeah, so all of these are questions that were asked 2 years ago in the initial Q&A thing. And then a couple months ago, when I did that giveaway for Playrail Henry and Edward, I opened it up just for a little bit to allow people to ask questions about more recent things, such as Big World, Big Adventures, Journey Beyond Sodor, Season 21, Season 22. And so that way, so there were some more questions added from that. Not a whole ton. There was still a lot from the initial one. But yeah, I still can't believe that I started this when I was at 9,000 subscribers, and here I am at 96,000 subscribers on my regular channel. So anyways, I appreciate you guys being here, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So let's get started. All right. So the first section is the television series. And the first question is from a kid with Thomas and a camera and James the Train 77. What are your thoughts on Ryan the Purple Tank Engine? So at first when I saw Ryan, um, like I thought he was just kind of another plain character, not much to him, kind of like Stanley, Rosie, where it's just like they're there for toys. Obviously, he's very colorful, kind of a bland personality and whatnot. And I didn't really like. I liked him in Legend of the Lost Treasure. Like he didn't really stand out to me. Like, oh my gosh, Ryan's my favorite character now. I liked him as a character, but I really got to enjoy him in season 20, especially the episode Ryan and Daisy. I thought his personality really came out, and he proved to be a fun character that isn't just a purple Thomas that you can throw in to replace Thomas in certain stories. He has his own unique personality, especially that he has his own branch line that he works on. He has certain characters that he works with on a usual basis. I think it'd be really fun if Ryan got like some coaches, kind of like an Annie and Clarabelle to him, or maybe like if he had like a break van or some sort of rolling stock that was on the branch line besides Judy and Jerome. I think that'd be really fun and kind of add to his dynamics. I think Ryan's just a fun character. I love how he's kind of a pushover with Dave, because it's able to address in the stories, kind of not abusive relationships, because that was more of Legend of the Lost Treasure with Skiff, but some people, are more easily manipulated, and they don't realize that people are taking advantage of them. And I think Ryan's a good character, where he's had to realize when he's being taken advantage of, when Daisy's tried to convince him to do certain things. And so I like Ryan as a character. I wish they would use him more. I think the episode in season 22, A School for Duck, I don't think that episode was written for Duck. It just doesn't, like, if you take the episode and you remove Duck and put Ryan in, like, it's basically the exact same. I mean, the school children are up at Harwick, which technically Duck's branch line doesn't run up there. That's Ryan's. And then there's that one scene where Duck comes up to Edward and the slip coaches, and it's like, wait, Duck, why don't you have the slip coaches? Like, they're always with you. When have they ever been with Edward? And so I think that Edward was a substitute for Duck, and I think Ryan was supposed to have that episode. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was something the creators of the show were trying to, like, here we have this episode. Ryan isn't particularly a strong character that needs to be here. Let's put a classic fan favorite in instead. So they might have done that. I think that there's a likely possibility that it was done that way, but I don't think there's ever a way that we'll know about that. That's just kind of my own personal thoughts on the episode. All right, Annie C. asked, Donald and Douglas or Bill and Ben? One pair gets to stay, one pair is gone forever. Which will you choose? This is tough because I like both pairs, honestly, especially the classic set of twins that we have. If I had to choose one, though, I think I'd keep Bill and Ben because of how mischievous they are, especially in the classic series. They're one of the few that are very small and very mischievous, and so I think that they're, especially being yellow too, I think that they stand out amongst the crowd. So if I had to pick one, I would probably stick with Bill and Ben. But that, not to say that Donald and Douglas aren't great characters in and of themselves. So, all right. Now I don't know how to say this, and I need to apologize if I butcher anyone's names when I'm going through this. Like, I'm sorry. Send me a direct message if needed, and I'll try and correct that in case your name comes up in future questions. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the purple beanie or TAH purple beanie, but anyways, the purple beanie, I'll say it like that, asked, are there any engines usually regulated to the background in the current TV series that you wish to see come into the spotlight again? One character that I really was hoping was going to come back into the spotlight was Rosie. I don't think Rosie needed to be repainted to come into the spotlight. And obviously being repainted didn't bring her into the spotlight, so it didn't even really matter. But I think that, it's up to the writers just to choose whether or not the characters should be utilized as the main focus. I think, honestly, they could take almost any story where Thomas is the main character And if they wanted to, they could take that idea or that plot and swap out Rosie for Thomas, and then obviously change the certain things that each of their personalities have. But I think Rosie could handle what she could take a whole episode on her own and be the lead for it. I'm not sure why they haven't done that. I don't know why they thought that, oh, she needed to be repainted. They couldn't have a pink engine anymore, but then they ended up not doing anything with it. So I think Rosie could definitely take the lead again. Stanley, it's been forever since I watched The Great Discovery, so I'm not entirely sure what Stanley's personality even really is, what makes him unique. But, there's so many stories where the character doesn't have to have a unique personality in Thomas, because the story or the plot or the situation that the character is in is unique in and of itself. You can have a more generic character take the role of. And so I think, I've seen a lot of criticism online about how, Boko, we don't even need him back in the series because he's too boring, he's too bland, there's nothing special about him. And in some ways, I guess that may be true in certain aspects about him, but there's so many stories where you can swap out the character because the reaction of the character's personality of the situation isn't the driving force behind the story, it's the situation itself. And I think you can use those more minor characters for those roles. So obviously there's episodes where Sydney sings, which was great to see someone who was normally in the background get to be at the forefront. But I don't know if we'll really get to see a lot of him in the future. I mean, we did get to see the case of the puzzling parts, so that was good. So I would hope that we get to see more characters. Ari and Bert are another set that I really wish would actually take a lead role. I'm kind of disappointed that instead of recreating the Sodor Steelworks, that they focused instead on having this mainland steelworks in Journey Beyond Sodor. And so Ari and Bert are just kind of, they're just seen in the background, usually at the quarry or other places. They haven't gotten a main role. And I feel like they're unique characters in the fact that they're the grim messengers of doom that could be used, rather than just being Diesel's sidekicks, or like in Diesel and the Ducklings, where they're just there to be the stereotypical Diesel compared to Diesel himself. So I'd really enjoy seeing them come back and take the lead. I wish Norman in the CGI series also got an episode to himself. I think he's one of the characters that in the TV series that has never actually had an episode to himself. He just kind of existed there, and I think that he's just kind of a byproduct of what was going on in the Miller era, which is a shame because I think that he could have been really I don't really know what his personality is, but they could create a personality. I think that one of the serious problems that the current team has with writing for characters is that they kind of think in their minds that, oh, these characters were written by someone else and established originally, and so we can't do anything. We don't dare touch those characters or make them different in any sort of way. And so, which is fine for certain classic characters because they've been established for so long. But if you have someone like Norman who was not really written with any sort of personality, instead of introducing a new character, if I was on the writing team, I would say oh, look at this character is almost a blank piece of paper. There's so much potential to create with them, and so I think there's a lot more they could do with background characters. I really loved in season 17 and season 18 how they really did have characters in the background driving the episodes, especially the first season 17 DVD that we got, Railway Mischief, where Kevin got an episode, Stafford had an episode, Scruff, characters who you would have never thought would get their own and be leads ended up having great episodes on their own. So I think it can be done. I just wish that they would focus on doing that. I thought that there would be a lot of potential with the series until we had the Big World switch, but I think just because there's only 13 Sodor episodes now, those are going to mostly be towards the Steam team going forward, with obviously some side ones as we saw in season 22, but I don't think that we're going to get a lot of background characters in the future. But who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong. I mean, there were some great episodes, and there was a few good ones in season 22 with minor characters involved, so maybe we'll see that again. All right. Next question. Thomas Tanker 02 asked, are there any occurrences that you thought that Mattel could have brought back an old character, but instead created a new one for toys? And as you can see from the character I've depicted on the right, I definitely think Rebecca is one of those. I think Molly could have easily been brought back and served the exact same purpose as Rebecca, but clearly they don't want to do that. From what I understand and what I've heard is that the current TV series team has absolutely no interest in rendering or bringing back characters from kind of the hit era. If they're going to bring anyone back, they're only going to bring back characters from the classic series that'll kind of be some fan service to older fans. Other than that, they're just going to create a new character, and especially for toys. So I think Rebecca's like the prime example. With other ones, I'm not entirely sure who else would have. Trying to think. Yeah, I can't not think of any off the top of my head that fit. I guess maybe Charlie was another one that instead of making him, they could have brought back Billy. That was so long ago, though. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I think in the case of Big World Big Adventures, they instead of making new female characters, they could have brought back old ones, or brought taken old ones and put them in the spotlight. I think that would have been a better thing for them to have done, such as Molly instead of Rebecca. But Rebecca's a good character, and I've enjoyed her, so it's fine in the end. All right, Nathan Reviews asked, "Are you happy that Glynn is back?" Yeah, I wasn't like super fond of Glynn in The Adventure Begins. It was like, oh, cool, that's like a fun little thing that they threw in. There wasn't anything in particular that I was like, oh my gosh, Glynn is so amazing. Like he has to return in the TV series, especially since season 19 aired right after The Adventure Begins, and we weren't quite sure if it was before or after, like when they created it. And so since Glynn didn't return in season 19, it was like, oh, okay, Glynn was just kind of a one-time thing that happened in The Adventure Begins. Like that's cool. Like I mean, he had it like he's tied to the Railway series. They mentioned him running the branch line before, and so that was cool. But then when they brought him back in season 20, I thought it was really interesting because I wasn't expecting them to bring him back in the Christmas episodes. And so I thought that was really cool, especially like Marion being the one who finds him. Like I don't think anyone was really expecting that of all characters. And so like I think it's great that Glynn was brought back and that they actually were able to utilize him. I think that Sodor kind of has an issue of like abandoning characters and sightings and then restoring them. Like you've got Hero and now Glynn. Kind of an interesting thing. Maybe they should check more of these sightings to find missing random characters who have been left to rot. But I'm glad Glynn's back. I think that he's fun. I like his dynamic with Steven and Millie up at the Earl's estate. I think it'd be really fun since Glynn technically ran Thomas's branch line before Thomas did it. If there was maybe some history between the two, maybe we had an episode where Glynn kind of tells Thomas like, "Oh, this is the right way to do it because this is how we did it back in the day and whatnot." And there could be some fun stuff there, but I don't think Glynn's a super prominent character that's going to get a lot of screen time in the future. But I think he's definitely gotten a great amount for, especially because I didn't think he was going to get any initially. So I think that they've done a great job with him, and I'm glad to see that they've utilized him in season 20 and season 21. All right, Jamie Giraldo asked best ARC season. Okay, so ARC Productions rendered they animated the series between season 17 and season 20, except for the last 5 episodes of season 20. That was when Jamfil took over after ARC declared bankruptcy. So I think personally, aesthetic wise, seasons 19 and 20 were definitely superior than seasons 17 and 18. 17 and 18 just looked so unfinished. The stories are phenomenal, but like it's hard to watch them because it's like they're just a little too plain. The lighting just doesn't look right. Things just don't look finished. Like Sodor looks empty. You just have like kind of these open spaces of nothingness, and it just looks odd in some ways. But like they definitely improved, and I'm glad that ARC took so many steps to improve the series that they were rendering and animating. And I think they did a great job. I mean, watching season 19 like for the first time was just mind blowing. The only thing I really do not like that Arc did was all the red trucks on Sodor. I've never liked that from the beginning. Like even as a kid, in my mind, you know, the coaches were colorful and they got to be behind the colorful engines. But when it came to goods trains, you know, they were dark and dirty and grungy, and that's why the big engines didn't like them, because they were dirty cars, dirty freight cars, and whatnot. And so, like having them be all red. Plus, I think that there's I think Britt and David back in the model series, I think they were genius about it, especially having the bright colored engines with the dirty, grungy, duller colored cars behind them. I think that contrast helped make the engine stand out so much, which, I mean, especially like you have Thomas, who's, you know, bright and colorful, pulling a long line of gray and brown freight cars. Like, obviously, you're going to look first at Thomas. And so it kind of helps him stand out from the background. I think one of the problems with the current television series is that they're trying to make everything too colorful. And when everything's too colorful, then technically nothing is, because it's all just a huge mess of like everything's just kind of blasting at you. Don't know where to look. And that's something for like me as a marketing major. What I've often thought about is that you want to guide people on where they look and what they look at first. And so, like in my mind, having the engines be bright and colorful is like a necessity, and then having everything else be a little more dull in the background, because then the first thing you notice is the bright, flashy engine, and then like everything else you'll notice later. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that I haven't been a fan of with Arc, but I think Arc did a great job improving the series. I think season 20 didn't have quite as good of lighting as season 19. Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure definitely had the absolute best lighting out of all of Arc's work, and so I think they did an amazing job with that. All right, Train Inspector 11, Michael Holycross, and Jamie Giraldo asked, do you prefer CGI or the models? So that's a tough one. Like I don't know. We've seen good model like good model series and bad model series, and we've also seen good CGI series and bad CGI series. So I think to say like, oh, like one or the other, like it's hard, because there's been great in and so I think, you know, nostalgically, like I love the models, especially in the first 4 or 5 seasons. Like I thought they were amazing. It really created this atmosphere, this location. I mean, it made the island of Sodor feel real, felt tangible, like you could actually go there, and it was a real place. I think CGI wise, they've been able to do so many fun and unique things that they couldn't with the models. Cool camera angles, fun, interesting things that would just be so difficult for them to accomplish with the models. So in some ways, I definitely prefer CGI, but in others, I prefer the models. If they were able to, you know, if they took the time to make the CGI series more like the models, and especially the details of the sets, and trying to, you know, make it feel more of like a realistic location, maybe the textures and the renderings of certain characters and things to look more like they're actually tangible rather than cartoony, then I think I would prefer CGI entirely. But yeah, I'm just kind of a mix of both. And so I'll take a break really fast from answering questions. I'm going to look at the live stream really fast and see the live chat. What I think I'll do is I'll break every once in a while and come read the comments, see what you guys are saying, maybe even do some shout outs to you guys. I meant to do this for each question, but I kind of got distracted just going through initially. So yeah, I'll probably go through a question or two, and then answer it, and then I'll come and see what you guys have to say. So it looks like a lot of people in the chat are saying models that they prefer. Let's see. Oh, Hank American Engine asked what were some of my favorite episodes from season 19. I'd have to look at the list. I don't think someone asked favorite episodes of season 19 later. I think they asked about season 20. I know Thomas the Babysitter is a good one that people enjoy. I'm trying to think, what were the other ones? The ones in the first DVD that were released were really good. Who's Jeffrey? I liked that one. I liked Henry Spots Trouble. I know a lot of other people didn't like that one, but I did. Then what was the Lost and Found one? Can't remember the name of that off the top of my head, but I liked that one as well. Toad and the Whale was one of my all-time favorites, especially in season 19. That was a great episode. I wish that in later seasons the Little Western would have gotten more screen time. Okay, well, let's go to the next one. There doesn't seem to be anything super interesting going on in the chat. So, do you prefer The Adventure Begins or Season 1? The Thomas Pandit fan asked. Again, like I said, it's kind of a tough one where like there's some things I liked more about the what they were able to do in CGI. I think having The Adventure Begins be so cinematic, and I loved how the stories tied in together and like built up towards the climax, and like especially like so with The Adventure Begins, I spent a lot of time with my remake, of course, like watching every single shot and how to film it. And then when I did the voices, like I had to listen to all the lines, and I had to like piece all these different things and even piece the sound effects back together and recreate all of it. And as I was doing that, like there were so many things about The Adventure Begins that I didn't notice the first time going through, that I like when I think about how Andrew Brenner wrote it, I thought, wow, that was really clever of him, because the way that they have him like tie the plots together is ingenious. And on top of that, I mean, there's only like the main 5 characters, 5 engines on Sodor, and Andrew Brenner did a great job in the fact that you have these 5 characters, and then just like using them and kind of forgetting about them over time. Like he has them pop in at certain spots, and he timed it perfectly, and it had them coming in a certain order, so that way each one had their own unique plots that helped Thomas. And they all kind of tie into the story together. So like Edward's kind of there throughout the whole thing, but there's some parts where he's not needed because he's acting as a mentor to Thomas, and Thomas needs to start learning these things on his own. And so Edward's not actually seen there, but you see Edward at the end there with Thomas and whatnot. And so like it just ties together really well. James's role, he pops in every once in a while. Here's James, and you get the taste of his personality. You get the hint about the wooden break blocks, and then there's the big chase scene with James. Henry, like he's not as prominent, but then he has his story about the rain. He and Thomas have conversations every once in a while. You see Henry in the background, or like Thomas says something to Henry throughout the story, and then you get the whole plot with Henry being scared of the rain and Thomas helping him out at the end. So it's nice how it like ties all together. Same with Gordon. He has his plot with Thomas. Gordon has kind of the longest break, though, because after the Thomas gets tricked, where Gordon pulls Thomas behind the express, Gordon doesn't actually really do anything or speak until the very end, when after the whole chase rescue scene. But Gordon gets his comeuppance in the end. But it's great how it like builds upon itself. I never realized also how the theme of being a small engine was so prominent. Like I didn't realize like how many times they said that phrase and used it towards Thomas. And so like Thomas really was able to overcome that and prove that even though he was small, he could still be really useful. And so I thought that was great. Season 1 is amazing just because it's season 1. And I think that what season 1 really beats out The Adventure Begins on is the sets. Gordon's Hill, for example, is a perfect example, where in The Adventure Begins, it's straight up and down. In the classic series, especially season 1, it's got all these twists and turns. It actually seems like this big hill that they have to go over. And so I think the sets overall were better in season 1, but I mean, the animation and the what they were able to do as a what the director was able to do and whatnot with The Adventure Begins was better. So I don't know, if I had to pick one over the other, I don't think I could, just because they each served a unique purpose. And I love them both for what they are. Okay. Will Thomas 199 and Super James 526 asked, do you ship characters? And my answer is no, I don't. So, I know that this was a very controversial topic this summer. A lot of people had very strong feelings about it. So, just to kind of share my thoughts on it. So, I don't ship characters, but the thing is, I don't, you know, if someone wants to ship characters for their, like, they have their own fan series, their own ideas, you know, they have their own interpretation of the characters, I think that's fine if they want to. Like, I have no problems with people doing that. Like, I can't say like, oh, how dare you take this character that I've interpreted in my own way and you interpret them in that way. Like, I don't think that that's right. And so I think people are, you know, they're free to ship them if they want. When it comes to the actual television series, however, I don't think it's appropriate. I think it starts to shift and change the boundaries of what engines can and can't do, because it starts to humanize them more. And it leads to more questions, because it's like, okay, to what extent are they human? Whereas, you know, it's kind of been defined in Thomas, certain boundaries of what engines, how human they are. And so I think when they start expanding that, you start to enter kind of a gray area, and it starts to get murky. And I don't know. I just don't like expanding into that. I thought the moral of the story in Rosie is Red was good, but I don't think that that was the best way to execute it, because now it leaves all these questions, because, you know, Bill and Ben were implying that Thomas and Rosie could be a couple, or being kind of have a beyond friendship relationship, more of a romantic relationship. And then it makes you wonder, well, are there engines that do have those kind of relationships? Like, are Judy and Jerome technically married or a couple? Or Connor and Caitlin technically like that? Like, and so it just like leaves, like there's so much unnecessary questioning that happens because of that. And so I don't think it was appropriate to bring into the TV series. Now, if people like on their own, like I said, want to do that for their own series, their own canons, their own things like that, that's good for them. Like, I have no problems with you doing whatever you want to do. For my series, I don't, because I just don't think that's right, especially because my stuff pertains so much to the classic series that it wouldn't be appropriate in my mind. So yeah, no, I don't ship characters, but if someone wants to, good for them. All right, Gabriel Morio. I probably slaughtered your name. I'm sorry, Gabriel. Do you think Hit should do a reprise with the models in a future anniversary special? I don't know. Like, I think it would be cool to see the models back in action again and whatnot. But at the same time, like I said before, like, there's good CGI Thomas and bad CGI Thomas. There's also good model series Thomas and bad model series Thomas. And so if they did bring it back, but if they did it in a, you know, a very early model style to pay tribute to that, I think that'd be absolutely amazing. You know, bring back the glossy engines, I believe it was acrylic eyes that they used before. I can't remember what it was now. They changed the color of the eyes, and I think it looked better earlier. If they did those things, you know, made the sets as colorful and elaborate and detailed like they were before, like, that would be so cool to see. But if they're going to bring it back just to create something that's like seasons 8 through 11, yeah, I'd rather just them stick to CGI personally. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Let's take a look at the comments. Let's see. I see Thomas and Friends 47. Shout out to him. He's a great friend. When I get to the Q&A about my series, I'm going to mention him a little more. Someone asked, do you like Michael Brandon's narration? I know that there's a question later that discusses narrators, so I'll get to that soon enough. Let's see. Yeah, most of these questions that people are asking in the chat are questions that are going to be addressed later, so I'm not going to address them right now. Oh, someone asked, what do you think about... Okay, so Thomas Fan 2405 asked, what do you think about the Thomas replica in Japan? And I think that's pretty cool. I'm not quite sure if I would buy it, depending on how much it costs and what it actually looks like, the final product. I know it's been going through some revisions and changes. If it's kind of... Because right now it looks like it's very much Hit era Thomas, and I'm not a fan of the color that Thomas was during that era. But if the color is something more like what we see in CGI or classic Thomas, I might be more likely to purchase it, also depending on the price and whatnot. I think it'd be really cool to, like, someday, you know, when I'm older, obviously, and more well established, and have like an office in my home or something, to actually, you know, have a scale replica of the original Thomas there in my office, just because Thomas has played such a huge part of my life. Most people, even when it comes to my career and professional life, like people know me for Thomas and what I've done with my channel. So I mean, for me to have a nice display of a scale one or scale replica Thomas, you know, in my office that was, you know, like well done and obviously looking not cheesy or anything. Like people would not be surprised to see that in my office. So yeah, let's see. Someone asked if I make original characters, and I will address that when I get to my own series, since right now we're just talking about the TV series. Someone asked about pancakes or waffles. I will answer that when we get to the random miscellaneous questions. All right, let's keep moving forward. So Joseph Rogers asked, do you think Philip is funny? And actually I do, which is, I know that's not a popular opinion in the fandom. Some people have very strong anti-Philip feelings. I think Philip, however, was I think he was a character that was great when he was initially brought in. I love that they reused him, like they kept using him. I think if you're going to bring in a new character, that character needs to continue to be utilized in the series, and I'm glad that they did that with Philip. Like I'm glad that he got to be in the Great Race. He got episodes in season 20 and 21, and I thought that that was great. I think, however, in the fandoms and the Thomas community's minds, I think Philip kind of got ruined because he was utilized too much, especially in the Thomas Creator Collective, because we had Philip's initial appearances in season 19 when it was released. He had those 2-part episodes, and it wasn't bad. Like it wasn't overwhelming. But the Thomas Creator Collective included Philip in every single episode. I think it got to be too much for the fandom, and they really didn't like it, especially because I think the personality of Philip in the TCC wasn't quite the same as in the TV series. It was a little more exaggerated. You know, his voice was higher pitched. He was a little more intense, and so I think that also drove a lot of people in the fandom not to be fans of Philip himself. But like I remember when I watched The Great Race for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, I actually really do enjoy Philip as a character. I thought he was used great in that movie, and I think his episodes in season 20 and 21 have been really good. I don't like how he's kind of shoehorned into certain things though. Like I don't like how in the Hugo episodes in season 20, how he goes with Thomas, Percy, and James to Ulfstead Castle. It's like, why is Philip there? Like, maybe if it was Thomas and Philip and maybe another random character, then it's like, okay, that makes sense. But like, when Philip goes with the main 3 characters, it's kind of like Mattel or someone's trying to force Philip into somewhere where he probably doesn't belong because they're trying to make him more of a main character than he actually is. And I think that like putting Edward with Philip in season 21 was a terrible choice. Not because not because of Philip as a character. Like I think that having Edward mentor Philip is really fun, especially because like when Philip first came to the island, Thomas is like, "Oh goodness, he's so young and reckless," and Edward, jokes that like, "Oh, that reminds me of someone." And so I think it's kind of fun. But instead of having Edward mentor Philip, I would have rather see Thomas mentor Philip, because it kind of, passing on the torch. And Edward helps Thomas, and now Thomas helps Philip. And so Thomas could kind of take on that big brother role. And so I think that was kind of lost by having Edward specifically paired up with Philip. Also, I have no idea why Philip's in Wellsworth if all of his work is basically in Knapford. That didn't make any sense. Someone says my mic seems to be fading in and out. Can you guys hear me now? Is that better? I wonder if there's a way to turn it up. Someone says Mrs. Cow. Oh, so Mrs. Cow, a fun little thing about her is that it started off as like a one-off joke in the Thomas Creator Collective. Like someone had put her in. Then the producer really liked Mrs. Cow, and then I helped write a bonus scene that actually used Mrs. Cow, and Philip was in it. And so since then, like I think it was partially just because I wrote that bonus scene, but I decided to actually like throw Mrs. Cow in as many shots as I could in the TCC, especially in the background. And I had a lot of fun with it. Like it was just kind of a fun ongoing joke. I know some people really didn't like it, but like, I mean, it's just a cow in the background. Like it's not a big deal. And if you notice in my The Adventure Begins remake, you'll actually see several what am I thinking of? You'll see several shots where Mrs. Cow is in very random places. Like there's one where she's at Knapford, or like, yeah, you just have to look closely because when I filmed The Adventure Begins, it was at several different times over the past couple of years, and so yeah, you'll see it some shots where back when I filmed it in 2016, like she's there in the background. So yeah. Okay. The Horrid Lori asked, do you think there needs to be more or less railway realism in the TV series? Um, so this question was asked, and there's a lot of questions that have this issue where they were written. The question was asked to me back when season 20 was in the middle of airing. The first part of it had already aired with like Tinsel on the Track, and like the first 10 episodes and whatnot, and then we're waiting for the second half. And it was before any of the announcements about Big World, Big Adventures, or any of the changes that were going to happen. So a lot of the questions were asked in that context, not asking about what my opinions are towards Big World, Big Adventures. And so that's why I'm going to answer this, obviously, how I would have answered it back then had I actually finished the Q&A in a timely manner like I should have. But I'll also answer it what I think going forward now. So I think that they did a really good job in season 17 through 20 with the realism. I mean, there were some areas where they could have done some more. I mean, I would have preferred for the cars in Rolling Stock to have been, a wider variety, also, more realistic colors and whatnot. I think that would have been good. But I think sometimes people, I think that the realism can bog down the story. Like I think the classic series did it right. I know some people, there's some railway series purists who disagree with me, but I think that like what Britt and David did working with Audrey's material, I think that they did a good job where there's kind of this balance between the two, having very railway realistic stuff and then also having, the magical land where dreams come true, kind of having them overlap. I think that's where you get the best Thomas content. I think when you drift too far to one side, it becomes either too dull or boring. A lot of people don't like Christopher Audrey stories because they say that, it's just bland. There's too many railway technicalities and things, like they're just not fun stories, and that may be true. I haven't thought that personally. And then you have like on the other end, Thomas the Magic Railroad, where they took things too far. And so I think that having a balance is best, where there's a world that seems realistic to a child, that has its set boundaries and it's defined, and so like a kid can relate to it because it's similar to the world that they know around them. But the difference is that there's these talking trains. So that's kind of the difference between the child's actual world versus the imaginary world that they're watching. But like, I think that that's kind of the key difference. So in some ways there could be more, but also I don't think that like all like that certain stories are terrible just because they have unrealistic things. And I don't think fantasy sequences are necessarily bad in and of themselves. I think the way that they've been used in previous stories were great. I think the problem with Big World, Big Adventures is that mandating that they need to be in every single one makes them unnecessary, and so it takes it away. But then, like, you have a scene in Big World, Big Adventures where Thomas does a whole loop, and it's like, well, then what's the point of having fantasy sequences if the reality is just as crazy as the fantasy? And so that, like, I don't really understand what really the purpose of the fantasy sequences are at that point. I don't know. So I think definitely in Big World, Big Adventures and everything going forward, they definitely would be better to add more realism, especially like, I mean, there's just some overarching things. Like, I mean, obviously everyone could like nitpick all the little tiny things about Big World, Big Adventures that like, oh my gosh, like the Thomas isn't the right gauge in this area, or this isn't the right type of locomotive, or this isn't this or that. Like, I think maybe more of the general things I wish they would have fixed. Like, the fact that the same red rolling stock, the British rolling stock, is used all over the world. I think that's probably like the most painful thing to see, because instead of the world seeming big and vast and like so much for Thomas to explore, it's like, oh no, it's just the same rolling stock used all around the world. Like, Thomas, this is hardly any different from Sodor. It's just slightly changed here and there. But in regards to season 17 through 20, I think that there were some areas that they could have improved, but for the most part, I think it was fine. I didn't have any issue in season 21 with Philip's number, when people I know were very outraged over when when he was starting to daydream, the trucks they formed a 68. I thought that was fun because it was just Philip daydreaming. And it wasn't necessarily the most realistic, but it was a daydream, and I thought that it helped drive the story. And so I thought that was good. But yeah, so I think for the sake of moving the story forward and keeping it a fun, entertaining story within reason, you can go and stretch a little beyond. Not everything has to be exactly railway regulation style. Let's see what you guys have to say in the comments about this. There's not any in particular. That's okay. All right. Casey Kearney, Christian LaRocca, Jonathan Mason, Donald Fan 99, Thomas and Friends, Bertram 1, AJ Doms, Hitun San, Ryan Rockets, Crazy Thomas, Lucky Luke 121, Michelin 2, Basketball Flip, Ellis Speed Draws, Optimus Prime 2471, Luca Dollar, Joanne Prince, Northwestern Railway Studios, Northwestern Railway, Emily number 12, Express Studios, Daniel Milov, Thomas Mario Fan 11, and Streaming Studios asked, favorite character? That was the number one most asked question. And I would have to say my favorite character is Thomas. As a kid, like I just related to Thomas the most. Like, I enjoyed watching Thomas episodes the most. Like, that's why, like, I guess I'm not like other people who are very like, oh my gosh, we need to have more of the other characters on Sodor. Thomas needs to have less spotlight. Like, I don't mind Thomas getting spotlight, especially when it's like appropriate spotlight, where Thomas is, on his branch line doing his thing. Like, let him have those great stories. When you start shoehorning Thomas into things or being in places he shouldn't be, I'm not a fan of that. Other favorite characters, though. So while Thomas is probably my childhood favorite character, I think like when I'm writing my own series, I think Gordon's my favorite character to write. He's just fun. There's a lot more to do with him. James is another character that I really like, except I've found as I'm writing, like, I just naturally write more for Gordon. Like, I like to brainstorm lots of story ideas, and I actually have a Google Doc where I continuously, like, if I get a story idea, I put it in there. I mean, I've got hundreds of story ideas in this doc, so it kind of helps me. Like, I only pick the best ones to actually write, and the best ones of those that I write to include in my series. And I found over time that it's so much easier for me to come up with an idea and use Gordon than it is for James. And I've noticed James and Duncan are two characters that I have a harder time with, because, like, I feel like their personalities and their characters need to have certain kinds of episodes. They shouldn't be overused, because they're like, then it kind of hurts their character. And so I find myself not coming up with as many story ideas for them, which is kind of the reverse way to look at it. So, but yeah, so like probably Thomas, Gordon, James. Interesting enough, like, Percy as a character has never resonated with me, and it's something that I didn't like actually recognize until like probably the past year or two. When I was compiling the stories that I had to start filming for season 3, I realized that I didn't have very many Percy stories, and I was like, wait a second, like, how did I not write Percy stories? And I just realized that, like, Percy as a character never has really like stood out to me, and so I didn't include him a lot. But like, he's everywhere in the classic series. I mean, season 2, he has more episodes to himself than Thomas. He has a ridiculous number of crashes in season 2. and like he's very prominent in a lot of the key Thomas episodes in season 3 and whatnot. And so um, I just recognize that like I haven't been writing very much for Percy, so I've actually made it like a goal of mine to come up with more Percy story ideas. And recently, I've came up with um, two ideas where Percy takes the lead, and I think that they'll. Um, I'm going to try and film these episodes when I finish filming season 3, because I'm going to have them take place on sets that are on the remaining season or remaining sets for season 3. And the one is about Thomas Percy and some canoers, and then there's another one where um, Percy is going to help Birdie out with something. I don't want to reveal any more than that, but that's something that I found over time. Duck's another one that I have a harder time with, but I've been trying to work on that because I've been able to recognize, because of how Duck's personality is in the CGI series versus how he was in the classic series. Yeah, Donald and Douglas, not Donald and Douglas, Bill and Ben are another set of characters that I really enjoy, that I definitely want to write more for and do more with. But yeah, another thing I should disclose is that like when it comes to favorite things, because a lot of these questions are going to ask about favorites, and I have a tough time with favorites. Like if someone asks me like, Jason, pick one specific thing and that is your favorite. Like what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite food? Like those types of questions that I get, like I can't give one straight answer because I have a hard time just like picking one thing unless something like really, really, really stands out. Like I just can't pick from amongst a group of things. Like if someone asked like, well, who's your best friend? Like I could never pick that amongst all like friends, because there's so many different things about them. Like you like different unique things about each one. And so I have a hard time with favorite questions. And so a lot of these favorite questions that are going to be asked in this Q&A, I'm going to try and give the best answer that I can, but kind of explain my reasoning of why I think a certain way. So yeah. All right. The Horrid Lori asked, favorite episode in seasons 8 through 16. Dang, this is tough. So seasons 8 through 16. So seasons 8 through. Okay, let me give my background to these stories in particular. Let me grab a drink of water first. Okay, so I was a child back around the time that season 8 came out. Like I was 4, maybe I was 5, 4 or 5 when Thomas the Magic Railroad came out. So I was, I started at the age where the classic series was just ending and it was starting to move towards the hit era. And so like when I was during my childhood, as I was younger, there was the great Thomas that we all remember. And then as I got older, things started shifting and changing. And I specifically remember watching the Steamies versus Diesels VHS. And that was my first time seeing the season 8 hit style. And I was still a kid that was very much into Thomas, just like how I had been my whole childhood. And I remember watching that and just being like, oh, this just really isn't Thomas, like the way I've known and loved it. I especially didn't like Emily being shoehorned into things. And so I kind of lost interest in Thomas at that point. That was like the first time in my life that I actually drifted away from Thomas. I think part of it was, growing up, and it just wasn't the same as it had been. But I think that the quality wasn't there anymore. So season 8 kind of started me away from that. I still watched some, and I remember watching some season 9 episodes when they came out, only a few. But then I didn't really watch much of season 10 or season 11. I did see Calling All Engines after season 8. I actually did purchase that DVD when I was younger, but that was kind of there at like one of the last things with my involvement in Thomas. Like as a child, specifically, like if I put an era of like my childhood of me liking Thomas as a child, that was probably near the end of it. And then obviously I, found my love for Thomas again a few years later as I got older. But so like I actually haven't seen really much of season 11. It's got that terrible yellow coloring to the whole season. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know with that. It was after season 11 that I actually started to get back into Thomas. which is odd because I came in at the worst time. Again, like so, I fell away as things changed and got worse, but then I came back into Thomas as things got even worser. Um, and so I started getting interested in Thomas when they started doing the CGI faces in season 12. And so I think I watched almost all of season 12 as it came out. I don't, maybe not all of it, but then when season 13 came out, I was like, okay, like I wanted to give the new CGI a shot, especially because like maybe it was the hit style just had left like a bad taste in my mouth from my childhood, but like just the scenery and the dullness of everything just didn't really appeal to me. Well, I started watching the season 13, and it was just after like the first few episodes had been released because I think they did like a theatrical release and then they had the actual release. So I remember one night I was I was home alone, and I was like, oh, you know what? I think I'll watch some of those on YouTube. And so I pulled up the season 13 episodes, and they were on a playlist. And so I watched like 4 or 5 episodes back to back, and I was like, these were all the same episodes. Like they all had the same, story structure and whatnot. And so like I really didn't enjoy it, but it was kind of that like got me interested in like, well, what should Thomas be? And that's when it was around that time that I really started actually creating my series and started planning it. And so I started writing my series during this era of not good Thomas. Um, and so to pick a favorite episode is kind of hard because I did watch all of seasons 13 through 16. I've seen all the episodes, which is funny because that's like the worst of Thomas, but yet I've seen it all. And I have seen all of well, actually, no, I don't know if I have seen all of season 8. Yeah, I don't know. So to pick a favorite episode, really, really tough one. I think for sure of the Miller era, I think Flashbang Wallop is one of my favorites. Like it's the best out of the worst, and I think it's because it kind of differed from some of the plot stuff that they normally had, so that's why it stood out to me. I don't know if it actually is the best. I like to think of it like, let's say you like one of those seasons 13 through 16 episodes got put in like season 20 or something. Like would I hate it as much like as the episode alone, not the fact that it's like all the other episodes or uses the same structure, but do I enjoy the episode alone in and of itself? And so I think Flashbang Wallop is one I would enjoy solely on its own, not within the whole season. I think Don't Bother Victor is another one that's pretty good, but I think the narrow gauge engines make me a little biased on that one. But yeah, season 8 through 12, I don't think I can pick one of my favorites from that. So yeah, let's see. Okay, just checking the comments. Let's go to the next question. So, again, these favorite questions. All right, Diesel 10.0, Train Inspector 11, AJ Domes, Playrail Guy 01, The Trackmaster, Thomas and Friends Show, Lego Ninjago Fan, Basketball Flip, Northwestern Railway Studios, Trainboy 53, GTSH Productions, Express Studio, and NWR Studios asked. Wait, NWR Studios got repeated on there. Sorry about that. I copied it from a spreadsheet, so it must have been a duplicate somehow. They all ask, what is my favorite episode? And I have a tough time with this. I can tell you my favorite season, but I can't like specify like what is my favorite episode. Um, so I think I'll just talk about like certain episodes that have some of my favorite key things, that like they could be my favorite episode, but I haven't really like truly ranked them one against another. I think particularly, so there's some things in season 3 that I really liked. Like Thomas Percy and the Mail Train, I think is one episode that like captures the feeling of being on Sodor. Like I don't know how to describe it, but like when that episode comes on and you hear the like the chime at the beginning, of the music, and just like Sodor is just like this peaceful, beautiful place, and you get to see the engines are running around at night and all these beautiful locations and stuff. I just think that it captures the heart of the feeling Thomas should convey, kind of that innocent, magical land. Just kind of like a child's fantasy, but pure and innocent. That's what I really get out of that. And it seems real and tangible because the scenery is so realistic. But it's not. It's realistic and visually, but it's also like larger than life. Like the places and locations are just things you wouldn't see in your normal day to day life, and so it's cool because it does seem like a child's fantasy being there. So I think that Thomas Percy and the Mail Train is one of my favorites. Um, Other episodes, I love the opening of Percy's Promise. That's another one, kind of for the same reason. Story wise, trying to think what's an episode I like. Dang, there's just so many good ones. Like I don't know if I could pick one out of those. And I hope all you people who asked this question, I hope I don't disappoint you in the fact that I can't just directly say one episode that I really like. It's just hard for me to really just pick one out of them all. So let's see. I think I'm going to move on. I'm sorry if that didn't properly answer your question, but I'm trying my best. It's just hard to really pick out what, like, if I had to pick out one episode amongst them all and say that this one is clearly my favorite. So I'm just going to move to the next question. Ryan Rockets asked, favorite non-rail character? Childhood me would say Birdie, but as I've been writing my own series and as I've dove in more to understand like who the characters are and their personalities and things, I love Caroline. Like Caroline's just fun because she's like this old lady with like kind of a southern accent. I shouldn't be treated like this and whatnot. Like I just think that she's fun, and so I've included her more in my series. You'll notice her like she actually she contributes to the plot of certain episodes and whatnot. But I really want to in future stuff as I'm writing really just capture her personality because I think it's really fun. She's just very unique, and I love the voice George Carlin gave her. And so I think that she kind of stands out from among the crowd because I mean Birdie and Terrence, they have their personalities, but I feel like they're more simple. They're more standard Thomas characters, which makes sense in the first season because they were all establishing themselves as part of that world. But I think Caroline kind of differs herself from everyone else. I think Butch is fun too because he gets to do unique things in the fact that he gets to pull. He can help tow vehicles. Having that crane allows him to do different things, so you can kind of use him in different plots. I think also because he's kind of a blank slate in a way because he never spoke until seasons 15 and he really didn't have much of a personality then anyway. So like he's kind of someone that you can kind of create stuff for. Bulgy's a fun one, but he's hard as series because he had his story and he ended up as a hen house, and now it's like I don't want to pull the Bulgy rides again thing where it's like, oh well, now Bulgy can suddenly drive again. Like I want to leave him where the Reverend and Britt and David and like where they left him, but kind of build on that too. And so Bulgy actually does have some. He does play a role in a couple of episodes in season 3 and 4. He's actually the key behind some of the episodes where he either influences or he is the main character of the plot. And so I like Bulgy, but he's just kind of hard to do, to write about and whatnot. Let's see in the comments if anyone's shared what their favorite character is. Let's see. Oh, I'm on the setting of top chat instead of live chat. Okay, well that makes a difference. My wife just barely commented. Well, maybe that was a few. Oh yeah, that was like 20 minutes ago. I have not been checking the chat very well. Okay, well, it doesn't look like. Oh, it looks like someone says they like Caroline and George. But yeah, so let's keep going forward. So, favorite song of the Great Race? Jet the Hawk 1994 asked. This was a tough one. Like the Great Race had a lot of really good songs. I think my favorite two would be Streamlining and Will You Won't You. for different reasons. Like I loved Will You Won't You because it was like all of Sodor all together, just singing and having fun. Like it really, it felt like Sodor, like the magic of it, but brought to song. And I think if you're gonna do a kind of a musical thing with Thomas, that was the way to do it. And I think that Will You Won't You is just a great opening. It's fun. You get to see so many characters, and I thought that was great. Streamlining's fun too because it gets to be about Thomas, and it's cheeky Thomas. Like actually, um, pure Thomas. The thing I like about Thomas as a character is I like when they utilize him in the series for the way Thomas has always been, or how he should have been since the beginning. Because Thomas had a set personality that you see in the beginning of the series with him. He's a cheeky little tank engine, and he has this personality. He has his branch line, and he fits in certain episodes and does certain things because his character drives that. When they shoehorn him into other things that doesn't quite fit, Thomas is just kind of a blank character, and at that point you could switch him out with Stanley or Rosie or someone else. But I love it when you see Thomas's actual personality showing through the way he should be, and I think Streamlining is one of the fun songs where they really did that because cheeky Thomas, of course, would be thinking like, what if I could be streamlined? What if I could be faster than Gordon? And so I love that they did that. I thought it was a great use of a fantasy sequence. Really fun. I remember seeing in the promotional stuff for the Great Race long before the actual movie came out, a thing with Streamlined Thomas next to Streamlined Gordon. And I had heard some insider info that Gordon was going to be streamlined, but I hadn't heard Thomas was. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, geez, like, are they just gonna streamline all these characters? Like that seems kind of weird. Like, but I mean, I trusted the Brenner and the writing team because they just barely came from Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, so I trust that they were probably going to come up with something really good. And so, like I held off, and I saw obviously the song when it came out, and I loved it. Like I thought streamlining was great. I'm glad I was able to remake it using the Playrail one, and just a fun song. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, definitely streamlining and Will You Won't You. All right, Paul the Railway fan asked favorite Thomas themes. So I've actually included a couple of themes here in this PowerPoint to share with you guys. So hopefully you can hear them. I'll try and turn them up so that way you guys can. These ones aren't my favorite, like absolute favorite themes. These are just some of them. Like I said, I have a tough time picking like single favorites. Like this is my absolute favorite out of all of them. And so these ones are just some that I've really enjoyed, and I just wanted to throw in for you guys to listen to. So let's go to the first one. So I really like the, I think they call it the viaduct theme, and it's kind of the term that's been going around. This one's like probably one of my absolute favorites, potentially even my favorite. I don't know. I love it in season 2. You know, watching all the engines cross the viaduct, it just seems so peaceful, simple, classic Thomas. Then I love its use in season 3. I think that's my favorite version of it. With All at Sea, again, like the atmosphere of the docks and everything. Like that song is just used to bring classic Thomas to real life. And then I love in season 4 how it's utilized again with Duke as he's going up the hill, and like how it becomes more tiring and straining. Like it's just a beautiful song. Like every time you hear that song, like you immediately think classic Thomas because it was only used back then. And I love it. So yeah, let's go to the next one. Okay, so I've already mentioned why I really like that one, especially that beginning, that little chime, just like, man, that just makes you feel like you're on Sodor. That one's a beautiful one. Let's go to the next one. So I love Henry's theme. It was one of my favorites that was reused in The Adventure Begins. Again, just another classic. The next one's Edward's theme. Really enjoyed that one. Okay, and then the last one is from, let's see, the episode Bulgy with Duck and Bulgy's Race. That song, it was really short, but it was one that stood out to me that I really enjoyed, so I threw that one in as well. So yeah, I think that theme might have also been used in Stepney and Caroline's race that they had. Not entirely sure. I'm not as keen, or I'm not as good with all the different songs when they were utilized and what all the different pieces of music. But there are others in the fandom who are really good at that. So yeah, but those are just some of my favorites. Thomas's theme is always a great one that I really enjoyed. I was never a huge fan of the opening theme. Like I liked it, but like it just didn't like, I don't know, compared to some of the other themes, I didn't think it was Thomas's best theme either. Okay. All right. So the Brendan Branch Productions asked, favorite Thomas US DVD and VHS. So I threw two on here in the pictures because these are probably two of my favorites. This one I think I can safely say I actually do have a favorite. So my favorite one, well, actually, okay, my favorite out of the two of these, well, I like two of these for their own unique reasons. So first off, the sing along and stories is one of my favorites because it was the first one I ever watched. Although we didn't have the VHS sleeve or the cover over it, so I only knew it by the actual VHS thing itself. I loved that one because of all the songs, obviously, and like you got to see a variety of Sodor. So I absolutely loved that. Then like the only stories though were the season 4 stories, Peter, Sam the Refreshment Lady, and Bulldog, and so like I didn't really get to see Thomas as actual Thomas stories, like Thomas in action. But then I think one of the first VHSs that I had where it actually had full episodes was Thomas and his friends help out. And I really like this one because one, it was longer than the average VHS because it was kind of a compilation one. But the stories in this one in particular, I think, like really drive home what classic Thomas was for me because it has stories from the first 3 seasons, and they're kind of mixed in, which is part of the reason why like I like the classic series so much is that you just kind of jump around and like the stories don't need to be in a certain order. Like you can watch them independently and enjoy them for what they are. You can watch them kind of in a random order and still like enjoy them the same. But I like because it's kind of like seeing things in different artistic styles, and so I really liked how like it starts out with like Edward helps out, and you get and like Foolish Freight Cars and some of these season 1 stories, and then jumps to Thomas or like Percy's Promise and Thomas Percy and the Melter, and you get to see some season 3, which I think brings Sodor to life even more. And so like it's just fun to get to see a wide variety. It just makes Sodor feel so big, have so many of these awesome locations. I love that. So yeah, the episodes on that. Are some of my absolute favorites. If like I think one of my dreams is as I'm remaking the classic series, if someday I was able to put together, well, I hope to eventually piece together everything and actually remake this whole VHS. I think that'd be pretty cool because it's one of my favorite things from my childhood. So actually, if I was able to remake all of that, I would be pretty proud of myself. Um, AJ Domes asked favorite TV show era. Um, this is hard, like, and I already touched on this before, um, because when we were asking about CGI versus models, and I think I like the models are probably my favorite from the early seasons. Season 3 is my absolute favorite. Seasons 1 through 4 are great. I add season 5 in there because there's just so much uniqueness, but it really is different and stands out on its own. So that's probably my favorite era of the show is seasons 1 through 4 with season 5 included. But probably season 1 through 4 is my absolute favorite. Then I love what Brenner and his team have done in season 17 through 20, and some of season 21, and then just a few episodes of season 22. I think that those have been phenomenal. Like I put those up there with the classic series. They've been so good. Like I'll watch them with those. Like they're so good. Anyway, so those would be the 2 favorite eras of the show. I was really like, I mean, people have seen me ranting on Twitter, various things about my dislike towards Big World, Big Adventures, and part of that, is I don't think it's the right direction for Thomas, but also because it's sad to see going from what was one of my favorite eras of the show moving to something that I really don't like, and so it was. I mean, it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways to watch the show go from being great to mediocre, if that, and especially because they were doing such a great job. I mean, we were on such a high note with the Arsdale Railway episodes and everything. So like it's just disappointing because it can be great and you expect great things because you've seen their potential, and it's kind of a shame that instead of moving in the direction of having more Legend of the Lost Treasure stuff, we're instead going to crazy, tacky, big world things. But anyways, um, Gordon Fan and James the Train 77 asked, "How do you feel about Emily being part of the Steam team instead of Duck?" This one I can give a very confident answer about because I've felt very passionate about it for most of my life. So I mentioned before, I did not like the transition to season 8 as a kid. I mean, I was a child when this happened. I think I was in I can't remember, but I mean, I was still at an age where it wasn't like I wasn't too old for Toms by the general population's perception, and I really just did not like the shift in CGI. I really did not like engine roll call, and I really like. I can't tell you enough. As a kid, I did not like Emily, and I did not like that she was just shoehorned in as part of this Steam team with the new roll call singing there 2, there 4, there 6, there 8, and then like having Emily there. Like one, Emily looks different than all the engines, and so like you could just tell that she was shoved in there just because she was a girl, not because she fit the general team of main characters, which I thought was really annoying because it was like she wasn't a bad character on her own, but it's like I just couldn't. enjoy her because I knew, even as a child, I knew what she was being used for, and I just didn't like that. So I think that, yeah, but as a kid, I didn't really see her as replacing Duck. I think eventually I did see that, but like initially it was just like Emily was just kind of being shoved into the spotlight. Because I mean, I only had watched the season 7 episode where Emily first appears, and then suddenly, bam, she's in the main cast, and it's like, well, wait a second, there's so many characters in Thomas. How come none of them are in the main cast? Why is Emily? Like, I thought Daisy or Mavis or Annie and Clarabelle deserve a lot more spotlight over Emily, and so Emily kind of symbolized the hit era to me. And I mean, as a child, I wasn't a fan of what they did with Emily, and so it's kind of a similar thing now having Mia and Rebecca in Big World Big Adventures. And so I know as a kid, I definitely would not have liked what they've done with Big World Big Adventures, and especially like I mean, Duck wasn't established as a part of a STEAM team. Like there wasn't that main core cast that they have to sing along about and whatnot. So I think it's even worse now that like you literally take Edward and Henry, who have been established as main characters of the series for 75 years almost now, as a part of the initial 3, and you get rid of them. You move them out of the main cast. I mean, yeah, people justify, yeah, they're still on Sodor. Yeah, if you want to get technical, yes, they're still on Sodor. Um, but to replace them with these 2 female characters solely because they're female, I think as a kid I would have absolutely disliked that, just like how I disliked Emily being shoehorned in. And I think it's hard. I mean, like as a child, I recognize that, and I think parents will have a hard time saying like, oh, the reason why Henry and Edward left was because they wanted to include more girls. So like Edward and Henry were kicked out because of their gender, and yeah, so like it's a hard thing. I just don't think that they went about it the right way. I think I would have liked Emily more in the Steam team if she had been established for maybe more than just one season or just a couple episodes. Like if she had actually been around for a little while longer, and I got to know her before they moved her into the main cast. But I think just the general idea of having a Steam team, having a main 8 or 7 or whatever, is just a bad idea. And I think that they should have gotten rid of that a long time ago. I think that it's one of the bad leftovers from the hit era that has seemed to stick around. Joseph Rogers asked, "How old do you think Thomas is?" This is a good question. I don't know exactly, but you can tell Thomas has a personality that is more of a child. But yet the engines on Sodor are kind of timeless, and their age doesn't usually really like affect them. Like there's certain characters that are obviously older than others and have more wisdom and experience, but like you don't have a lot of engines that are like, oh, they're older, so they're more wrinkly and whatnot. I mean, Gordon had the most wrinkles in his angry face, but that didn't necessarily mean that he was older. And Edward had the older personality. So I think Thomas, I don't know. Like in some ways, like I have 2 little brothers that they're 11 and 13 years younger than me, and so I got to watch them grow up at an age where I was more observant and able to recognize their personalities and things. And so, like Thomas would have to be like, I don't know, between 5 and 8 in some ways. I think maybe, I mean, in some ways, maybe he's even older than that. But he's still a child at heart, and he has those innocent personality things. Like I love when Thomas is cheeky because that's very childlike. I love when he's, not all knowing and not, like when he's also, he gets a little mean at times. Like, he calls Henry fat. I mean, he's not innocent. He's not the perfect ideal child. He makes mistakes. He says stupid things. He's rude to kids at times. Like I feel like Thomas very much amplifies a child. And I think that's why children could relate to Thomas so much. And that's why he became the title character that kids focus so much on, because he was such, it was something that kids could just really relate to. And they understood the personality of Thomas. So yeah, I don't know what a specific age would be. I think it kind of changes depending on his personality. Like to say, I know that there are charts that like show what personalities and traits kids develop at certain age, and I don't know like if I were to pin Thomas down somewhere on there where that exactly would be. But I think definitely more childlike. And I think the best Thomas and the most enjoyable Thomas to watch is when he is more like a child. and he gets to learn about his world and enjoy and experience things just like a child is experiencing the world of Sodor when they watch Thomas. So yeah. This is going to be our last question, and then I'm going to actually cut off this live stream because we have gone over an hour now. I said at the beginning that I'd probably only go for an hour, and then I plan on maybe tomorrow, maybe sometime over the next few days. I hope to do another one, just continue on. My goal is just to work through all these questions as much as I can. I'm finishing up finals this week, so I've got just a couple more things that I have to do school-wise, but then I should be pretty free. But then I'm also going on vacation with my family for Christmas break, so I won't be around. So I can't say exactly when it's going to be, but my hope is over the next month or so to take the time to do these live streams, to go through and answer all these, especially for you people who asked these specific questions, so that way I can get around to all of them and answer them for you guys. I plan on sharing these on my normal original channel. So hopefully more people will be able to come back and watch these later, because I know that channel only has about 1,000 subscribers, so not as many people are obviously watching the stream live, and so that way people who weren't able to watch live will be able to enjoy these and watch them just like the normal Q&A video. What would be a normal Q&A video had I just gone straight to editing and splicing it all together. So for the last question for today, Thomas 111520002 asked, if you could be any engine, who would you be? Probably Thomas. Like I mean I can't say like probably either Thomas or Gordon. I feel like Thomas, and it's partially because of me being a kid watching Thomas. Like I think I kind of molded myself around Thomas or felt like him, or maybe it was that Thomas influenced me. But I just feel very relatable to Thomas in a lot of ways, and that's why I think I liked him so much. Um, I feel like a lot of people in the Thomas fandom don't see Thomas as their favorite character because they overuse him, and well, the TV show overuses him, and they like other minor characters who have unique personalities and quirks to them. But I don't know, Thomas always stood out to me as a kid, so I think I would probably want to be Thomas. Another character I think would be Gordon. I think that'd be fun, either one or the other. Being able to, Thomas has his branch line, which I think is a beautiful part of Sodor, has a lot of variety in it, and I think Gordon, going on the main line, one or the other, you would get to see a good portion of Sodor and see a lot of great things. So I think if I could be any engine, it would be one of those two. I think Gordon being the Express would probably be kind of tiring after a while, because it's like running back and forth constantly all day. Maybe I should write a story about that, Gordon getting tired about. Okay, well now I've given myself an idea. But I think Thomas I'd like more because he had a variety of jobs. So while he had Annie and Clarabelle, which Annie and Clarabelle are like his two best friends that tag along with him everywhere. Like I think of going to work and like knowing that your two best friends are going to be there, and like you just have a bunch of fun with them every single time. Like I think that's Thomas with Annie and Clarabelle. I have I joke I had these two. Well, I have these two friends. We don't hang out as much anymore, obviously, as we've gotten older. But these two friends, they were both blonde, and we would hang out every once in a while, especially when my wife when she was away one summer. So I was hanging out with these two girls, because the four of us were really good friends and whatnot. And as I would hang out with them, I would joke to myself and joke with them that like they were kind of like Annie and Clarabelle, and I'm Thomas, because I'm off coming with these crazy stupid ideas, and I want to go do this crazy thing, and they're the ones holding me back, saying, Jason, you can't be stupid. Like you got to use some logic and common sense. And so I kind of joked about them, and so I think that friendship has helped me establish in my mind too, also what Annie and Clarabelle should be like. So yeah, I think it'd be fun being Thomas, working with Annie and Clarabelle, but then also being able to like have a variety of jobs, pull different things, do different things on his branch line. I think having that responsibility of having a kind of a line to yourself that you work on and kind of having that area to play, I think would be a lot of fun. So yeah, I would definitely pick Thomas. So yeah, so that's our last question for today. I will hopefully do another one of these live streams really soon. If you know people who asked specific questions that you saw in here who weren't able to tune in, share the video with them if you can, so that way they can see that even though it's 2 years late, I finally got around to answering their questions. So Hope to do more of these soon and eventually get through all 200, 300 questions and whatnot. So, anyways, I will talk to you guys later. I kind of molded myself now, Thomas, or something like him, or maybe the Thomas. But I'm still very relatable, Thomas, in a lot of ways, and that's why I so much. Um, I feel like a lot of people see Thomas character and the TV show overuses him. They like other characters, especially personalities, works to him. But I don't know. Thomas always stood out to me. Like, I would probably watch Thomas. Another character I think